The Australian Grand Prix has just finished, chaotic and eventful. I'm going to try cover it all in about 10 minutes, which is probably impossible. So if I'm looking over here, I'm looking at my notes, so I try not to miss something, basically. So let's get into it. Max, the first start, Max got away poorly. Both Mercedes overtook him, which I was pretty surprised at. And we had some nice racing for once between Max and Lewis, where both gave each other appropriate space. Max gave space because he's maturing, and he's got a car that he doesn't need to scrap for absolutely everything with. And he's starting to race the same way Lewis has raced for so many years with a dominant car, in that he knows he's got more to lose than the other guy most of the time. And he knows that it's foolish to mistake things. 2 years ago, I think Max either tries to keep it in and sticks it out in the gravel, or he crashes into Lewis. But now there's a more mature Max, and I know he was complaining, saying Lewis forced him out. Not for me. He left enough room, and I think there's margin for that kind of thing anyway on the opening lap. So I think that was all good. First lap as well, poor Leclerc. Stroll could do nothing about it, really. He had his teammate on the other side of him, and Leclerc just has zero luck. The poor man. Every single time I see something go wrong with a Ferrari, it's automatically assumed that it's Leclerc, and then I have to wait to be told otherwise. But again, same thing. Saw a Ferrari going off. It was Leclerc, just because Leclerc has the worst luck ever, which is unfortunate. And Sainz seemed to have good pace, so it was unfortunate not to see Charles try and use some of that pace. And it was all going reasonably well for Sainz. He was hanging on until Albon's crash, lap 7, and that kind of flipped the race on its head for George Russell and Carlos Sainz mainly. I don't understand, and granted, I don't know what goes on in race control. I don't see what they see. I don't understand for that one how it was a safety car and then it was a red flag, and doing this has to stop. It's been happening for ages, and it destroys people's races. It destroyed George Russell's race. It destroyed Carlos Sainz's race. Throwing out the safety car for a lap or two, you give teams a chance to change their strategy, think they're getting a cheap pit stop, and then you throw the red flag. Everyone else gets a free stop, and it's cost those people who thought they were taking an honest opportunity. It's cost them so much, and it needs to stop happening. I don't know what information they did and didn't have in between there being a safety car and a red flag for the Albon crash, but it didn't appear to me. What we were told was that the red flag was thrown out because they needed to get the gravel off the track and the debris off the track, but that was on the track when they called it as a safety car. So I don't know, maybe there's information we weren't given. I will always assume that, and I mean, you have to trust race control that they're doing the right thing. So we'll leave that one there. That safety car robbed us of George and Lewis racing, because they were really close. George was even saying he was really being pushed by Lewis. He couldn't manage his tires. So I was really looking forward to a battle between those two. Safety car came out. George went in, and we were robbed of that, and then Lewis gained the net lead through the red flag. So that was unfortunate. Next up, second restart after the red flag, all pretty smooth. Max went flying past Lewis on the straight. It was pretty scary again, similar to how he passed him in Jeddah. DRS Open, it's freaky how much of a pace advantage the Red Bull has on the straight, and Max went and took the lead. And I remember thinking at that moment, it's been entertaining, fucking see you next week kind of thing. And I was right for a good while. Lap 18, George Russell and his power unit weren't getting along. Basically, he went on fire, which is really unusual for the Mercedes power unit, particularly ever, to be honest. They don't tend to have power unit failures. So it was really unfortunate that in a race where they seem to have at least some form of proper pace, where George could have recovered and had a battle with Alonso maybe for that final podium spot is just unfortunate, and that's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. We were teased with Lewis and Fernando for the whole race, and I was very disappointed that we didn't get to see it. I was watching going, 1.1, 1.2, 1 second, 1.4, and it was just going forward and back, and it was like a chess game between the two of them, and you just know their engineers were onto them. Here's the gap, and they were responding accordingly. Two drivers that are absolutely incredible, and it was fun even to just watch them try and figure each other out, and Lewis was trying to keep the gap and Alonso was trying to close it, and it was one step forward, one step backwards, and I really enjoyed it, to be honest. Next point, Gasly was great. Thought he was fantastic, to be honest. He hung in there with the Ferrari, with Alonso, and Alonso was on the end of Lewis, so he was like very much in that podium hunting pack until the end, which we'll get onto momentarily. Max was destroying everyone up to lap 53 when Kevin Magnussen had one of the strangest crashes I've seen in a while. It's very rare that you see a car go into a wall the way that did and just have a shunt and the wheel just comes off and the car keeps going. The rear crash structure totally stayed in one piece, which was quite strange. Safety car again, then a red flag again, frustrating again. I don't know what goes on in race control. I don't have the information that they have, so I'm not going to pass judgment on it. But again, that changes people's races. It didn't have too much of an effect because of how late it was, but in principle, safety car and then red flag should be stopped. And I know it's difficult, and I know that Formula One is the most difficult sport in the world to police, but it needs to be done better. Third start was chaos after the red flag. Sainz on Alonso is a little bit tough for me. I think he could have done a little bit more to avoid that crash. But if it was put down as a racing incident, I wouldn't have an issue with that either. I think he had space on the right. He could have used it, and he did go in a bit fast, and he tagged Alonso. Alonso was doing nothing wrong, especially if you watch Alonso's onboard. He just really gets hit from nowhere, and he's on the racing line doing what he should be doing, and he gets hit. So that's really unfortunate for Alonso. Penalty, kind of fair. I wouldn't have batted an eyelid if there was no penalty for that, is what I mean. Next, Gasly and Ocon is all on Gasly for me. He's just not looking in his mirrors, and he's got loads of space on the left, and he's just slowly going right, and Ocon is there. There's nothing Ocon can do about it unless he wants to back out, and he shouldn't have to because there's space on the left. Gasly surely gets penalty points. He has to get a penalty for that for me. If Sainz is getting a penalty for the Alonso incident, then Gasly has to get a penalty for me. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, Alpine aren't going to push for a penalty on that because it's Ocon's teammate. We'll see what happens, but it's going to have to be a race ban because his penalty points, right? I'm pretty sure this puts him over. I don't know what the FIA are going to do about that. I mean, that's one that we can fill the void of F1 over the next month with. It's going to be tough. But Stroll going off seemed preventable to me. Don't know what that was. It just seemed like it could have been avoidable. Didn't seem like there was anything that really caused it. Previous lap was reinstated in the end, so Alonso kept the podium. Lots of confusion, processional formation lap then, and slightly anticlimactic at the end, but I think we got enough of a climax with that restart. That was crazy. And Sainz 5-second penalty, obviously he ends up finishing 12th, I think last of the runners. So that's kind of all that happened in the race and my takes on it. I'm going to give this race a 7.2 out of 10. Some people will call that harsh. I've seen people calling this a classic race. It's not a classic race for me. A classic race for me has to have, or almost always has to have, a battle for the lead, which we did not have. That's why I've marked it so harshly. 7.2 out of 10. that 2.8% that I haven't given is because there was no battle for the lead, which I value over everything in a Formula One race. So yeah, we'll see what happens with Gasly, and I'm sure the fallout from this Grand Prix will be more entertaining than a usual Grand Prix. And we'll be back at it again in Baku in a month. A month. It's like the summer break, but not in the summer. Anyway, nice one for watching. I'll have loads of videos breaking down stuff in more detail. This was kind of a quick run through, but yeah, see you next time. Nice one for watching.